What's going on, guys? Welcome to another NPCs Weekly News Roundup. It is November 5th, 2022, and tonight we'll be talking about the PSVR2. It finally got its price announced and its launch date announced, too. We're going to be getting into that. We'll also be getting into Square Enix finally announcing exactly what their NFT initiative is going to be, symbiogenesis, and what type of chaos that's going to bring to the gaming world. And, of course, we'll also be talking about EA and Marvel partnering up for 3 AAA titles. That, of course, and more after our intro here on the NPC's Weekly News Roundup. And, of course, as always, with it being the NPC's Weekly News Roundup, it's not just NPC, it's NPCs. It's plural. That means there's more than one of us. I'm Travis, and, of course, right there next to me via Discord, Kyle. Kyle, what is up, man?
Oh, Nada, what's up?
Dude, I guess a lot of stuff is happening. I built an Optimus Prime Lego, and he took up most of my life this last
Massive.
week. He's freaking huge. He's off camera though. I don't want to go pick him up off of where he's
Yeah.
at right now because that stupid leg keeps falling off. But that and oh my gosh, a lot of Overwatch too, especially Dallas Fuel, Overwatch
Oh
League
man.
champions for 2022.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
What a match. What a
That was
match.
that was awesome last night to see. I gotta say,
Yeah.
I'm glad that I started playing Sojourn like a whole lot more with Overwatch 2. I'm really glad that I started playing her because she is a beast, and it was proven how much of a beast she can be, especially in competition.
Yeah, I was awful hesitant early season, so I'm still on the pickup on her, but yeah, no. That she was definitely a game changer in that last couple of rounds for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So if anybody missed it, of course, go and check out that final. They went up to like the very end. It was literally neck and neck up until
Mhm.
overtime on a brand new push map of all things, though too. So seriously, if anybody is a big fan of Overwatch, go check out that Overwatch League final because it was worth it. But let's hop in, though, because obviously you're here for the news. Let's hop just right into the news. And we're going to start off with our title story for tonight, which is the PSVR 2 finally gets its price revealed and its launch date, too. And Kyle, this price, if it wasn't a VR headset tied to a specific console, a specific system, this price would probably be fine. But they announced it at $550 US.
Yeah.
$550 for this, which in the United States is $50 more than the PlayStation 5 itself. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, there's two ways to look at it, I guess. It's a major price point. I mean, it's you're spending a lot of money on a headset, on an accessory for a console. But aside from that, I think one other major point to look at is the fact that you've already got a big chunk of the hardware. What they're trying to sell you at this point would be something comparable to the Valve Index or to the new uh Meta Quest headset that's at the $1,000 price point. So if you look at it at that aspect, 550 doesn't seem too far off, or 600 if you do want it with the Horizon game. But on the other hand, it is a gaming headset. It's tailored to gaming. So I think it's kind of a jump. I wonder if part of it's because of the price hike on the Quest 2, but I don't know. What's your hot take?
I it's it's what $150 more than the original PSVR headset. Like I can't remember what that
Um
launch price was.
the original one I believe was $400 for the all-in, or no, it was 400 or 500 for the all-in.
Okay, but
And the all-in had your two wands and the camera,
okay.
and I believe it actually came with the zapper that was only used for a couple games, but it was a really cool accessory. So on and so forth. You got a game with it, I believe, too. So
And I think the game you got with it was kind of like a demo one that had like 3 or 4 different games bundled in with it in like
hmm
one disc or something. But anyway, even with that though, It's the fact that it's a single use type system, that it's only tied, or that you have to have a PlayStation 5 to use it. Otherwise, if they had opened this up where you could use it with PC games, and
Mhm.
use it in the same vein as you would a Quest 2 or an Index or a Vive or whatever, the fact that they locked it down specifically to being a PlayStation 5 accessory, for all honesty, really feels like they've neglected a lot of the player space that could have taken advantage of this. I mean, Sony's been making a very big push into PC as of late. And the fact that they haven't put forth the effort to like expand on that even more, especially this would have been a very big opportunity to say, hey, we'll go ahead and also release the PSVR2 with PC support. So that way, maybe we can also release our VR games on PC and also hit that market too, especially for the fact that it's still tough to get a hold of a PlayStation 5. We're going to cover some of that later on too. But it's the fact,
Well,
though, that it costs more than the PS5 and it's going to limit usability of it. And we may not see many games develop for it.
and it's funny, you open it up to the PC market too. We've already seen games like Spider-Man that had the code in it to actually activate PlayStation Network ID. So you
Mm-hmm.
could log in and gain, I believe it was free costumes or free experience or something like that after a certain point. And they've also talked about that code appearing potentially in other games in the future, as well as Sony actually, gaining a whole nother online aspect for their PC games. So, I mean, if they were actually to release the headset as a unit that would be compatible with the PC, why couldn't they just make it so you had to log into PlayStation Network and then they're getting daily logs too?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot that they could actually pull there, like usage wise and support wise and things of that nature, and then even open it up to like a larger ecosystem, especially with those other games and then the other technology that's built into the headset,
Hmm.
because their real competition is going to be those PC VR headsets because Microsoft doesn't have a VR headset. I mean, they've got HoloLens, but I'm talking like a VR headset for like the Xbox consoles.
Right.
Nintendo obviously has nothing. And if you look at what's just recently been announced and is now out there is the Meta Quest Pro. The problem with that headset is that it costs 1,600 US dollars. This has some of that same technology that headset has in it.
Hmm.
Granted, it's not a wireless headset, so there's no battery here. You are tethered, but the foveated rendering is one thing that the Quest Pro doesn't have. The PSVR2 also has the eye tracking with it, with the cameras built in, and I think the resolution between the headset, like the actual like per eye, is either about the same or a little bit better on the PSVR2. I can't remember where those actually split up at, but at that price point, at the 550 US dollars, that would have been awesome competition for like the Meta Quest Pro. That would have been great competition even for like the Index or for even the Vive Pro, but it's
Oh yeah.
it's going to be an afterthought because we're not going to see I like if Sony decides to embrace PC with this part and say, "Hey, we're going to take this and make it open up for PC use. You're going to have to meet these requirements with like logging in with a PlayStation ID or connecting it to this specific service for it to work."
Hmm.
They're going to be I think they're going to be too late to it, and I think there are going to be other companies out there, some like you have to forgive me. I know there's like two or three other VR headset companies out there that make some pretty decent headsets at actually some pretty competitive prices. They may see this as an opportunity to say, well, here's what PSVR is doing just for the PlayStation space. Let's duplicate it, see if we can get to their price point or better, and release that for PC. Try to open up uh, that area even more, and then it even adds in a lot more of that pro capability, so you don't have to go spend an arm and a leg's worth of money to go and get
Right.
the Index or the Vive Pro or what have you.
Well, and another thing to think about too is if they did link it to the PC and forced you to log into PlayStation Network, PlayStation has been notorious for having their PlayStation Network locked down as far as digital sales. And let's face it, I mean, the only games that you're really going to be playing on PlayStation VR are the VR titles. I don't know too many people that sit around in their living room, with a controller playing just regular games because they have a closed off space. I mean, it's
Yeah,
possible, and
that's
that
true.
all the headsets, advertise it as, being a thing, but I don't really know anybody that does that. So, I mean, if they did open it up that you do have to log in to the PlayStation Network, then potentially you could be accessing PlayStation Store, which, like I said, notoriously locked down by Sony, and you're still
Yeah.
giving them money to play their games on their headset. You're
Yeah,
just doing it on a different system.
yeah, and it's another one of those entry points though that if they can't even buy a PlayStation 5, if a customer can't buy a PlayStation 5, this still at least bridges them into the ecosystem in some capacity where they
Hmm.
buy this, it's a multi-use VR headset that they could plug into their PC, but then later on they're able to finally secure a PlayStation 5 and then they can take it over to that and then take advantage of some of those other experiences there that may not make it to PC in the first place. Um,
Yeah.
it feels like it's a lost opportunity on that. And I, I'm still not in the same boat on this because you and I have talked about it before that the PSVR2 price was going to be set based on the increase in price of the Quest 2, but
Hmm.
it's still just because it's very limited in exactly who it's targeting. And because this is targeting specifically PlayStation 5 owners, Quest 2 headset, like those people who want to buy one of them, it could be effectively anybody out there. But for this, you have to have a
Hmm.
PlayStation 5. So by them raising the price or deciding to set a price like this to say, well, we're going to try to match what the Quest 2 can do, it's like, you're not really matching too much other than price, especially if you're locking
Right.
that headset down. But I just I don't know. I'm kind of hoping somebody does hack their way around whatever potential lockdown or DRM could be in place that doesn't allow it to work on PC and say, "Well, yeah, I got it working. Here's what you need to do." And then, hey,
Well,
it becomes, pretty worth it.
and there's a ton of other aspects to consider as well. I mean, towards the end of its lifespan, the second generation headset, I believe, with the Iron Man 2 bundle, was $400 at launch. So I mean, you're still buying a PlayStation 4 all over again just to play Iron Man 2 if you bought that bundle. And then you also have to consider the fact that the PSVR2 has no backwards compatibility. So if you wanted to play any of those titles from the original PSVR, you actually have to still hold on to that original headset because it's compatible with the PlayStation 5, but none of the new titles are going to be compatible with that headset and vice versa. It's not the greatest business format. I think they
Mm-mm.
need to open it up if they're going to charge that much for it.
I think so. I That's why I'm thinking it's going to be something that we will see announced later on down the line. They're going to say, "Hey, we are going to add play or PC support for the PSVR 2 and we're going to
Hmm.
like put PSVR 2 games up there on some sort of marketplace, whether it be Steam or one of these other ones they might partner with." But I feel it might end up being too late that another company here is going to capitalize on the price point and the feature set to be able to offer something comparable for PC players. But again, I guess it probably
Yeah.
comes down to like what I said is that if you could get the PSVR 2 ahead of getting a PS5 and have that dual utility of being able to use it on a PC and on a console, then you're finally able to secure a PS5. At the end of it, you're probably going to end up being in a better spot. But I just don't know. I feel like this is going to limit the number of people who are going to be able to get to it anyway, just given the fact that, like you said, the backwards compatibility stuff is completely shot. The availability of a PlayStation 5 is pretty rough right now still too. And I just don't know. Being locked down to an ecosystem is kind of like one thing, but this just really feels forced for no reason.
Well, and granted, it is more and more available to get a PlayStation 5. You can pretty regularly get them on PlayStation's website, but even still, sometimes that means waiting in line for an hour. That's an hour that people don't have. and a lot of people don't like to shop online. They'd rather just go to the store. So that limits their, potential buying of the console itself. So I mean,
Yeah.
releasing a headset like this, it makes it more exclusive, but it makes me wonder, where the profit's gonna be at.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder like where the cost difference is going to be here in making this hardware versus what they're selling it for, because we already know that
Right.
they're taking a loss at least to a certain point on the PlayStation 5, which again, we're going to be talking about some PlayStation 5 sales numbers here in a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
but I just wonder, yeah, exactly what they're going to be showing as like their like what the cost difference is going to be. So needless to say, the other big thing to share, at least on the PlayStation VR2 front, is two big things. One is they are going to be selling a bundle as well with the Horizon Call of the Mountain, which is their VR title that takes place in the Horizon universe. And that's going to be going for $600. So an additional 50 to be able to get that game. And it's going to be a voucher code that you get, not a physical title, but it's going to be a voucher that you'll use to download the game from the PlayStation Store. Then finally, the release date is going to be, I believe it was February 22nd. Yep,
Yeah.
February 22nd of this next year is when it's going to drop. And I guess if you're a person who really wants to get it too, which hold on a second. Why am I reading that weird here? So on the article from Video Games Chronicle, like I thought that this headset didn't need anything other than to be like wired in, but it says here in the article a separate charging station for the headset will sell for $49.99, allowing players to charge the PSVR2 Sense controller while keeping the PS5 console's USB ports free. But it says it's a charging station for the headset, talking about charging the controller. So is the headset needing additional charge besides being wired in? Like, does it have something battery related, or
Uh,
is it just like a
I
docking station just for
don't.
the controllers? Like, there's something about that
Hmm.
line that reads a little weird to me. That's why I'm just
That
like,
is a little weird. Um, if I'm not mistaken, the HDMI though, that because HDMI 2.1 has power over HDMI, doesn't it?
uh, I don't know, but I mean, it's
Unless
not
it's a
using HDMI.
proprietary cable. Yeah.
It's using USB Type C
Oh, okay.
because
So
it should be
then
able to plug in.
yeah, it's gonna have power and data all over the cable.
Yeah, and I think it
Um,
plugs into the just to the VR or to not VR, but to the USB Type C port on the front.
maybe maybe it's similar to the new Oculus dock that you can dock the two controllers and the headset, and it's all magnetic, and it's just a way to store the headset itself,
Yeah, so the way it looks
but it
here is
charges the controllers.
yeah, so it looks like the controllers themselves are the only things here in their specs on the website that mention any type of battery. So the
Hmm.
way that Video Games Chronicle kind of wrote that was just a little bizarre is that yeah, it's specifically a charging cradle just for the controllers so that way you don't have to use up USB ports to like say charge each controller, with like a separate cable. You actually would just dock them into that one and then they charge up you know, free of the console itself. So
Right.
that's all it was. I think we got the confirmation on that one. But anyway, I think we covered enough on the PSVR2 part there, but I'm curious just to see what exactly we're going to see out of it like post launch, because if they don't try to expand into the PC space, I think with this it's going to be like I think the PSVR. Not to say that the PSVR was unsuccessful in any way, but it was pretty limited, and the fact that you can't even go backwards compatible on the PSVR2 with PSVR stuff is still going to lessen it, I think, even more. So I think they're going to need to expand it out farther. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you on that.
Well, since you're with me on that, let's go ahead and move on to the other thing you're probably going to be with me on, and that is talking about Hideo Kojima. He's been in the news quite a bit, mostly because of some other controversy stuff going on with another studio. But which has all been cleared up in that now. But at the same time, it's because he's been bringing on new voice actresses into his new upcoming title, which hasn't been announced, which hasn't been talked about, other than just the fact that he says he is working on something. And it turns out that some of that footage may have now leaked. Um, so apparently, what the game is going to be is that it's going to be a horror game, and it's under the current working title as Overdose. So it looks like Tryhard Guides talked about this back in June. Um, and it looks like the same footage here that's been leaked out. I'll bring the footage up here in a second for folks at home. Talks about, or at least shows off some of what's going on in there. And it seems to be that Kojima has embraced the horror genre. I guess probably part of that is because he was originally supposed to work on Silent Hill, and that kind of fell through. And we saw, we've seen some of like his efforts to do some horror or suspense related things in the games he's worked on in the past, but this seems to be more of an effort to actually work on something that is truly in the horror jump scares type like category, similar to Silent Hills or some of the more recent Resident Evil titles. But what it describes here is so it's going to feature Margaret Qualley, who starred in Death Stranding, and all it shows here in the video is just her character. It looks like whoever she's going to be playing here. It looks like maybe they did some face modeling in that. She is going to be, I guess, navigating around with a flashlight here in third person to, I guess, look around and try to discover something. But unfortunately, the video here was captured off of it looks like you're recording off of someone's phone who's recording off of a laptop or something like that. What my guess is that wherever this came from potentially is that if it's a internal build of some type, that this internal build they probably use something like Google Workspace, which is where you can create videos basically like in a YouTube format there, and then put those up. So like you use the same almost video player there to watch that stuff. But yeah, it's
this guy like stole this laptop. He's like shirtless. And he's
yeah,
like standing in a bathroom or something.
I made sure to go and watch this ahead of time because I was curious to see what this was. But at the same time, I went to go see what was up because I wanted to make sure to watch this, and that's when I saw that too. So I can confirm that there's nothing in here, nudity or anything else related, other than what is going on in that reflection. Fortunately for us, though, right, Kyle, I guess is that your head there from Discord is actually blocking anything else mostly there.
Yeah,
anyway, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's. Basically, it has the character walking around you're in a third person view, and you're using this flashlight, I guess, to look around, look at something. It looks like whatever it is going on. You can actually see on the character's arms there whether they've dug into something else or what have you. It looks like maybe there's like an infection or something going through, or it could be maybe they were just digging through something that was dirty or whatever. But it has that sense of the horror that it seems like it's trying to guide you to actually use your flashlight to look around for different things. You'll see like little red markers kind of like pop up here in the video. And it seems like you're supposed to use like your flashlight almost to turn around and interact with those things. Yeah, you can see like a little character or enemy or what have you there popping up in the background. So not sure where things are at here on this, but even so, it's definitely a very interesting thing, I suppose, to see Kojima working in the horror space, but I guess not too far off because he's at least alluded he wants to do this. But yeah, you can see the splash screen there, game over, and then it even says, a Hideo Kojima game, Overdose. And yeah, that's the skinny of it, at least. I don't know what else there is really to talk about other than I guess back in 2019 he had said that he was watching a bunch of horror movies in preparation for a future project, and then in April 2020 he said that he wanted to make a revolutionary horror game one day. And of course he's also partnered up with Microsoft to work on some type of cloud project. So whether or not this might tie in with some of it, or maybe this is not necessarily leading up to it, but maybe this is just kind of the next thing he's doing while trying to figure out the cloud stuff. I don't know. But what's your take on even that little bit of footage there, like, I mean, it's kind of not a lot to glean, but what do you think?
Yeah, it didn't really give a whole lot to go off of. I mean, it'll be interesting to see, a Kojima horror game. I know, like you said, he's toyed with horror in previous games in the past, but never really gone all in except for when they were going to do the Silent Hills game. So uh, I don't know. It'll be cool. I don't know. The whole flashlight thing kind of gives me Alan Wake vibes, but hopefully it doesn't lean too much into that and it takes a different turn just to see something different and unique, but I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it'd be kind of cool to actually see um, if they maybe go a little bit like that. But I have a feeling it's going to be more of like that suspense level type of horror, instead of just like being directly chased by some type of baddie or what have you, and then you have to interact with it. I feel like it's going to be more of the suspense of knowing that something is there, but maybe not.
Right.
Maybe it will be even one of those that you don't actually do anything about it. You just kind of have to deal with the consequences of this entity or whatever it is around you and can't like get rid of it. You can maybe hinder it or avoid it in some capacity, but not necessarily like, oh, you're going to pull out a gun and shoot it. Okay, you're now out of ammo, and all you can do is throw the gun at it and then run away and hide. It's like, no, you've got to do something more elaborate because, come on, we know how Kojima does stuff.
Yeah, maybe something to do with the way that the flashing of the triangle and stuff. Maybe if you hit it at certain times, it is able to you're able to do different things like paralyze an enemy or something by hitting them with a blinding light, or I don't know. Maybe you're able to actually catch them, and you can only catch them in the light at particular times when the reticle is full or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What lends credence, though, to this actually being potentially official is that it looks like Kojima has actually. Um, it sounds like Kojima may have actually sent out some takedown requests for this video, or at least this video as it's been getting kind of like moved around or what have you. So it lends at least to the possibility that this is pretty authentic, but it could also be something that they just put a code name to as Overdose, for some other project. Like this could have been something that dealt with like maybe the new or the Silent Hills game that he was working on with Norman Reedus and Guillermo del Toro, but who knows? I mean,
Well, and I do have to mention it because apparently it did come up in his podcast recently when he had Jeff Keighley on it. It's definitely, definitely not abandoned.
no kidding. I mean, it's funny to think about that. It's definitely not been abandoned per se, but it's
Oh, no, no, no.
uh,
The game.
oh yeah.
The game, the fake title or supposed real title that's being worked on in Unreal 5 that's titled Abandoned.
Oh yeah.
Uh it is not that game. So,
Oh,
and
I
he has
misunderstood.
nothing to
Okay.
do with that title. Yeah.
Okay. Understood. Sorry, I missed the. I
Yeah.
somehow crossed wires on that one, but okay.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
it's very easy to do because it's a title that's potentially and probably going to get abandoned as far as it goes. But we do know for sure that Hideo Kojima has nothing to do with the game that is titled Abandoned.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Serpent Knight adds here in chat says one wonders what direction he could take. PT seems to have influenced Capcom on Resident Evil Village, so what can be done to make it stand out? Well, we've had enough horror titles come out anyway, and I know that there's the revitalization of Silent Hill, given that we've got the Silent Hill 2 remake coming out and all the other Silent Hill titles that we talked about several weeks ago. Those are all coming down the line, so it's tough to say like what he could do potentially different, but I mean it's Kojima. I mean he was able to make a pretty big game that basically was just a giant walking and bridge making simulator
Hmm.
with gooey shadows that would eat you alive. But
With the whole
it's
premise of bringing people together.
exactly, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he could just take the exact same format there and just keep building upon it and just add a horror spin to it. Who knows exactly how he's going to be able to
Yeah.
handle it. But in the meantime, of course, we just have to, as we always say, we just have to wait and see. So,
Oh yeah.
well, as we wait and see, of course, this is where we enter this phase of the news where we want to roll our eyes because we always love talking about this type of topic, Kyle, and that happens to be
Ugh.
NFTs. Square Enix has finally gone ahead and announced their NFT initiative here, and it kind of pissed off
Excuse
a
me
lot of
while I
people.
get the trash can so I can puke.
Yeah. Originally thought to be a revival of Parasite Eve. Turns out it is wrong. They have announced a NFT project called Symbiogenesis. It is going to be, at least what they describe it as, a first digital collectible art project designed from the ground up for Web3 fans, whatever that means. According to the article here from Engadget that we're referencing, Symbiogenesis takes place in a self-contained world containing a large cast of characters that can be collected as NFTs. Square Enix says you'll be able to use these digital artworks as profile pictures on social media accounts. And here's where I find it funny. Something you definitely wouldn't be able to do by simply taking a screenshot. Go figure. So that's all we know right now. It's coming out spring of 2023, but it seems like the fact that they are deciding to go forward still with NFT stuff, even after all of the outrage and outcry from the gaming world that NFTs just don't make sense. They're doing something silly still that they're trying, but why? Like, who's going to invest in this stuff? Like, Kyle, do you want to go play a game where the only thing you're doing is collecting an NFT that then you can use as a profile picture for something? I mean, when was the last time you changed your
No.
profile picture on one of your social medias?
Probably when I made it, actually. I really I don't tend my social media honestly that often. I think I tend my Discord and my Steam more than I do my social media. So the whole idea of playing a game just to get social media, and granted there's a lot of people that do use social media. They use Twitter, they use Facebook and whatever, and
Yeah.
they change their profile pictures 3 times a day. I'm not one of those people, and I think the margin of people that plays games that to collect NFTs and that also change their profile picture daily is even smaller.
Yeah, it's funny to think that they're deciding to push ahead with doing something like this, especially because like one of the platforms that they release their games on, Steam, banned NFT games last year. So the fact that they're not even going to
Yeah.
be able to potentially publish on there with whatever this is means that this is probably going to be some sort of web browser based situation where you're actually going
Well,
to play like within an actual web browser to do whatever it is you're doing instead of having to download a client or download a game to do it.
Well, and I think it's funny in the Engadget article they actually mention that uh, Ubisoft last year they tried the whole Ghost Recon Breakpoint NFT thing and sold barely anything. They actually ended up having to give away NFTs to employees in order to try and promote it, and the employees didn't even want them. So e- someone in the industry had to have looked at that and said, "This might be a bad idea, but you know what? Let's try it anyway. Let's go ahead with it."
It's funny to think about, yeah, that it's like they forced it on there, and the fact that Square Enix has sold off like several of its studios as well too to Embracer Group now, and that they're turning around and using this money to make NFTs. They're going to be blowing a lot of that money on basically nothing, and people aren't going to be putting out for it. It's
Yeah.
it's a very lose-lose situation for them in that capacity, and I just think that the fact that they're still doing any type of investment in it is just silly, especially for the fact they also named it after something that could have been considered a part of Parasite Eve's revitalization, because like the end of the Engadget article here says, meanwhile, Square Enix may have to try to place 8 fans who were convinced that Symbiogenesis was actually a revival of 1998's Parasite Eve. After the publisher registered Symbiogenesis as a trademark last month, some pointed out that the term means, quote, the merging of two separate organisms to form a single new organism, bleh, which is one of the foundations of Parasite Eve's story. So they really screwed over some of their fans by going ahead and making it like one of those situations. It's like by saying, by registering this and getting people worked up for Parasite Eve, which, as far as I knew, was a pretty decent game series, at least for the few like spin-off things they even created for it too. What a way to mess with people at the
Well,
same
and
time.
the other thing that I think it's funny is the first thing they mention is, you can change your profile pictures on different social medias and stuff. It literally leads back into one of the things I originally said about NFTs is it's basically like back in the day when we would go to the store and spend $20 on a disc that had 20,000 pieces of clip art on it. It it's like the same thing. You're just spending an egregious amount of money on one piece of clip art instead of, uh, you know, $20 on a lot of clip art.
I see that too, and even like Serpent Knight said here in chat as well, has said NFTs are like pogs of the digital age and just as pointless. Yes, although
hmm
I mean you have to admit the fact that it's like he's not really wrong, because it's like you could create your own pogs. You just had to put something in like the actual pog maker. You'd clip the thing
Yeah.
down and it would pop right out, and then you had your
You
own and
just
you
had to
could sell those to
destroy
other
one of your
people.
magazines or draw something and then put it, with a piece of cardboard and pop, there's a new pog.
Yep, NFTs are like pogs. There we go, officially here right
Yeah.
now. That's what they are. But I'm so tired of NFTs, but we had to talk about this because it's Square Enix doing it now. And just like Ubisoft, it's not going to be worth it. There's no way, shape, or
No.
form here, because it's like you're gonna make us invest into this to get profile pictures for stuff. No, thank you. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's going to be any placating the fans. They're they're going to have a lot of pissed off people, and people aren't going to buy into it. I mean, there might have a few, but the whole idea is honestly, I feel harebrained. It's going to fail if it ever actually gets off the ground.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I really am. But what we need to do here is carry on into talking about some more chaos, especially in the world of gaming. And it's funny, though, to at least read about this, given that we just talked about the PSVR2. And that is Sony sharing its PS5 sales data, and it's not very pretty. It really isn't. So Sony, of course, had their fiscal year 2022 quarter two results shared out, and they shipped 3.3 million PlayStation 5 units during the 3 months that ended in September 30th. So that would be July through September. And they said it's the exact same that they sold last year, which means that for the first half of the year, they have sold 5.7 million PlayStation 5s, which, if you just take those numbers and you multiply them by 2, that's going to be well under their target of what they're going to be able to sell, which they had set a target of 18 million. 5.7 times 2 is, what is that, 11.4 million consoles potentially. Yeah, I think even with the holiday season, I don't know if they're going to have enough stock built up to be able to actually even sell in the first place. So I just don't know what to think about that, especially that you've got them ramping up the production of the PSVR2 headset. You've got them even showing that they're not able to ship enough PlayStation 5s to hit their own like metrics. I don't know how they're going to do any of this stuff, especially going into the holiday season. I don't even know how chaotic it's going to be.
Well, another thing to think about too, and I don't think they probably mention it in their sales report. Maybe they do, and I'm just not seeing it in their report or their forecast, is the fact that they had to pay for engineering costs to re-engineer the PlayStation 5 twice over now
That's
to
right.
make the
They
heats.
did.
Yeah, They've had to, and that the
Oh
first
my
time
God, that's right.
that they re-engineered the system was literally just after they had announced that they were starting to turn a profit on the console itself. So then all of a sudden they turn
That's
around
right.
and they have to spend fees in re-engineering the system, and then spend new manufacturers fees in getting new heat sinks and the new components that are have the swapped parts around.
Yeah,
Why?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're talking. Let's see. The first rework they did was, yeah, it was a different heatsink design, but then they also changed the Wi-Fi antennas. And then
Hmm.
the second hardware revision was another redo on the cooling, and I think didn't they shrink the motherboard though too? And they
They
also
did.
put in that heat shielding there on the expandable storage slot for the M.2 drives. So yeah, you're right. That is a lot of re-engineering and then retooling, especially for the stuff that has to be cut and molded. And yeah, so I mean, they even made it clear here in their sales that like profit fell by like significantly by 49% is how bad it
Well, no,
was. Yeah. They said right
yeah,
here,
yeah.
yeah, they said right here, even it's like they said the decline in gaming profits was due to an increase in game development and acquisition costs, including the purchase of Bungie, as well as a negative impact on foreign exchange rates, reflecting a high ratio of U.S. dollar costs. Which, yes, the U.S. dollar
Hmm.
is pretty strong right now because of the current ongoing economic situation around the world, and the fact that we don't know if we're in a recession now or not. But um, it's still just like things dropped pretty hard, and with the amount of adjustments and redos that they're doing to these consoles, and that they're still trying to ship stuff out, and they've also got new hardware on the line with the PSVR2 coming down too. I don't even know how they're going to be able to turn a profit, like at least, or get above that massive loss, because if you can't get the console into people's hands, you're going to have to rely on people on PC buying some of these new games. But at the same time, you're showing already that those numbers are not at the level that they would be compared to what you're selling on a console. I don't know what's going to happen with them through the next half of this year,
I'll tell you how you turn a
fiscal year, that
profit
is.
is you raise your price of the console in foreign markets, excluding the U.S. $50, but in the U.S. package it with a game and technically raise it $50, but you're packaging it with a game that you're selling through your marketplace at a higher exchange rate anyway because you have exclusive rights through your marketplace. So you're still gaining more profit off of it digitally anyway. Uh, it I mean they're gouging the consumer because of their own uh bad bad I guess marketing, or it wouldn't even necessarily be marketing, it'd be production of the console, because they could have stuck with the original engineering. Yes, it was a little high in cost, but they did start turning a profit on it. But then they turned around, they re-engineered it so they could turn a higher profit on the console, and when they started turning a profit on that one, they totally re-engineered the entire board so it would be smaller, which is going to be an even higher cost. I mean, short term higher cost, long term you're going to be saving money. However, it's going to cost you and show that in your annual and your quarterlies that you're losing money.
Yeah, I think that's going to like continue to hit them, because I bet you we're still not done with hardware revisions. Like the fact that we haven't seen anything like even like more substantial come up about the potential of a PS5 Pro, which honestly should still
Hmm.
be way down the line given that they can't even get PlayStation 5 into people's hands. But at the same time, we're kind of getting to that point where we would expect to see something like a slim model. Um, because we're hitting about we should be getting pretty close to the 2 year mark now since the PlayStation 5 released. But the idea, though, that a slim model should be potentially coming that is smaller and it still functions the same way, we're not seeing anything like that. So I wonder what the possibility is of them doing more hardware revisions to the existing hardware before we even see a slimmer Pro model start to come down the line. Not to mention, it's also going to depend on how much more revenue they can bring in from their other services. Like they even go here and say that they dropped nearly like, what is it, 2 million users for PlayStation Plus. I mean, they're making more money though still. Like they actually say profits are up for that part of that part of the revenue that they actually track. They're seeing it as up, which means they probably have more people subscribing to the expensive side of those new PlayStation Plus tiers. But they've got 2
Mhm.
million less people playing now, 2 million less people who went and canceled their memberships. So, what exactly are they going to be able to do to sustain where they're even at right now if they're showing stuff in decline in the first place? Like, they can't go blame Microsoft with the Activision Blizzard stuff because that hasn't gone through
Right.
yet. They can't blame PC players because it is easier to get a hold of PC parts now. Granted, some video cards are still a little expensive, but it's not that hard to build a PC. Where does the blame come from on all of this, though, now? It's got to be something with them.
Yeah. Um, it has to be at this point. I think it really comes down to uh bad planning or a late glance at the sales projection. I couldn't say for sure, but it seems like they hopped on the ball of trying to reduce the console costs too early. They should have let it ride a little bit longer, and then instead of making two revisions, they should have just made one solid revision that would have made them last a little bit longer. Because at this point, I think s- being as that the headset doesn't launch until February of next year, we probably will start seeing rumors or maybe even announcement of a PlayStation Slim and even a Pro model at the end of next year, but it won't be slated until holiday of the following year. So you're looking at potentially 2025 before you're seeing an
Hmm.
actual PlayStation Pro, PlayStation Slim model because of where they've put themselves at this point.
I would bet we'd actually probably see more of a. I agree with that. I bet you we'd actually probably see Microsoft figure out what's going on with Project Keystone and actually see those Xbox streaming boxes in houses well before we see something happen. I mean, hell, even the possibility of seeing a Xbox Series S refresh, like the rumors were also talking about too,
Mm-hmm.
where they would shrink the die size on the Series S to be able to make more, but they would be upping some additional specs within it, though, to at least
Yeah,
offer
the RAM
some
specifically.
exactly to help offset some of that criticism they've been getting in months past about the limitations of the system.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine actually seeing a lot of that stuff first, well before we see anything out of Sony. Excuse me. So I would expect to see, yeah, probably about that. I'd probably say somewhere between, I'm thinking late 2023 to late 2023 to early 2025. So literally, that's going to be a year and a handful of months for them to
Mm-hmm.
have something where it's not just a simple hardware refresh in the same case, but an actual PS5 Slim or even the potential of a PS5 Pro. But I can't see what a PS5 Pro would even look like, given that a PS4 Pro was people going. It was like offering um, some no, not even didn't even offer 4K. It was just that it was more powerful and allowed for some prettier stuff when it came to 1080p and that. And I can't think of anybody who can go out and afford an 8K television. So it's like, are you just going to try to push it where you can run 4K at 120 FPS or something? It's like, or ray tracing is going to be that much more stepped up. So
Yeah.
that even comes down to it is like, what does a pro model look like nowadays? I can't picture it, especially in a cost effective manner where you're going to get the proper distribution to the masses versus what we saw in
Yeah.
previous iterations of pro models. But that's just me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and especially since the size of like the size of the console currently is just so massive, and they have shrunk the board, but they haven't shrunk anything else about the system yet. So it I mean, a Pro would almost have to be the same size, and they would have to make something smaller, and maybe even something smaller than that for a Slim. Who knows? Maybe the Slim wouldn't be nearly as capable. Maybe the Slim would maybe even be closer to like a Series S unit. It just the diskless, you know, not as much processing, not as graphically capable, but still powerful system. You know,
Oh yeah,
not
absolutely.
not able to put out that 4K signal, still able to read the discs, but it can only put out the 1080p signal. You know,
Yeah. I don't know what that will look like, but I guess again another one of those things we're just gonna
and
have to wait and see on.
maybe not even read the discs. They've talked about here potentially releasing units that could have a standalone disc tray. So you could potentially be buying a PlayStation 5 that you have to buy an additional disc unit. Um, and this would also bridge the gap for the current users with the digital units,
Hmm.
just so people can play games and not have to worry about um, so much hard drive space, because there are a few games that don't necessarily require as large installs with with the disc, but the so many of them are getting fewer and fewer further between that you might as well just have a digital console, and we're getting to that point. You're just buying it for your movies.
Yeah, basically. Uh, let's do this then and carry on actually to our last story in the main news portion of the roundup for this week, and that's talking about EA and Marvel basically shaking hands, just like EA and Star Wars did, to make some games for the Marvel Universe. And it's already been confirmed that this will take place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in some capacity. But yes, that is correct. EA and Marvel have signed a big deal to work on 3 brand new AAA titles. It sounds like what's going to be going on is that we're going to be getting at least one confirmed so far, is that it's going to be an Iron Man game, and it's going to be worked on by EA Motive. So they are, um, they're going to be working on 3 new titles now, I guess, for the Marvel universe, and it seems, I guess, like probably a logical choice to do, given that the Star Wars titles that EA has worked on have actually been pretty good sellers. Given, of course, I know that we've got, we've had some headaches
Minus
with.
a couple hiccups.
Battlefront is probably the biggest one to talk about there. But
Yeah.
things like Jedi Fallen Order, the upcoming sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, um,
Mm-hmm.
the mobile games as well too, because EA is responsible for Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, which apparently made $1 billion in microtransactions, and
Yeah.
so that's going to be a big thing, especially for them to continue that partnership on, to, I guess, work on Marvel titles, especially. And EA is a big developer; they're a big publisher, and it's going to be kind of cool to see another Iron Man game that isn't in the VR space. I guess what they've talked about here is that there is a apparently an open world Black Panther game that they have actually in the works, which could be one of the other 2 games that haven't actually been talked about yet. I'm sure we're going to have more details going in probably into the summer of this next year, when we start to have game announcements and things, that we'll probably start seeing more stuff like maybe concept art, or maybe like really early looks at some of the things that they're trying to tackle or to approach. Or just like anything else happens, we're probably going to have a leak somewhere. But
Yeah.
what do you think, Kyle? I mean, do you think EA is the best choice for this stuff, even with their hiccups? Do you think that maybe they should have tried going to another
Um.
developer? I mean, I know the world of game development is pretty chaotic right now, but mostly because of who's being acquired by who anyway, given Embracer Group sucking up everybody. Tencent's been involved in investing in everybody. We've got some studios being shut down or reorganized. We got Stadia having closed down too. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, even with all of this, and I guess we already mentioned Microsoft and the Activision Blizzard stuff earlier, and Sony acquiring Bungie, but what do you see? Like, does EA seem like the best partner for this?
I mean, I don't necessarily know that they're not the best nor the worst for the job. I mean, all companies are going to have their hiccups at this point, if you look back in their past. And EA's no exception, especially when you point your fingers at Battlefront with the loot boxes and everything. That was a major fiasco, and it caused a big headache for the whole Star Wars franchise in as a whole in general, I think for games, and it probably hurt EA in the long run. I mean, as a base for the company, um, in fact we all kind of know it did, but um, I don't know. I just I really hope that this doesn't affect their relationship with Naughty Dog at all. And them producing, the Spider-Man game, the Wolverine game. Um, I feel like as long as they do better than the Avengers game and they don't try and pull a live service game out of the whole scenario, um, the this could be a partnership that has potential.
Dear God, you had to go mention live service game, and that's actually something I'm very concerned
Yeah,
about
that
because I just
EA's notorious for them.
yes, absolutely, and a lot of other companies are pretty notorious for it though too. It's
Hmm.
I really don't think we should have something that is a live service game. It needs to follow, I think, the scope of like what Jedi Fallen Order did, is that it
Yeah.
needs to be a standalone single player experience that is big enough that allows you to explore, adapt, grow, change, and kind of have the adventure that you want to have without it requiring that live service interaction. I don't
Well,
not every game requires live service, and I hope that they realize that if you want a good like AAA title, you don't have to give it a live service tie-in.
and it's funny because Marvel's previous partnership with Square Enix, they tried to pull the live service game with Avengers, turned around, did the same, almost the exact same style of game, with Guardians, but not as a live service, and it was totally successful. It sold way more copies, even though that Square Enix saw it as a failure. The game actually was quite good, and it got good ratings. It was talked about quite a bit. So I mean, eh, it it's hard. I think though that as long as they stick away from that Avengers format and try and pull something out like the the Guardians game, or something more heavily story focused that doesn't even necessarily have to lean into that like third person, almost live service esqueness. Um, it they still have a strong bid for it, I think.
Yeah, I think they do. I think the idea of them still trying to adapt anything that could be potentially live service is still out there. I just truly hope that they don't do anything and that they have learned from the mistakes of what um, Square Enix Montreal did with the Avengers. And I guess fortunately, didn't Square Enix Montreal also do Guardians of the Galaxy?
They did, but like I said, they viewed that game as a failure, even though that it was quite successful and it did
Right.
sell quite a few copies. I mean, it was on Game Pass, but it still sold quite a few copies. It was talked about well. It was highly reviewed. So
Yeah, I just hope though at least that with all of these lessons, I guess, learned about the games and that they can come out, especially of the Star Wars games as of late, that they do take the approach that they had with, or at least saw with Guardians of the Galaxy and what they did with Jedi Fallen Order, and that they do continue to push down the path of something that doesn't require those extras, those modifications to try to make it just continuously profitable. It's like you guys have other titles that you're putting out already that are taking care of it. Let's just work on the core gaming experience for the game, for the players, for the fans, and not try to alienate them by making it so that way it's always just got fresh content all the time, even if you're nowhere close to being at a point to like take advantage of it.
well, and I think having Jedi Fallen Order in their portfolio and previously working with Disney's studios on that title and the sequel title has
Yeah.
helped quite a bit going into the Marvel partnership, and just them seeing that EA is able to do a proper story game and do it quite successfully, actually, as long as they don't have to lean into the whole money grubbing aspect of it. They can put out a good one-off title and still make a lot of money off of it, and potentially, you know, still breed that franchise that EA so desperately loves, because we know that they're one company that they don't like. For a while there, they didn't like to touch titles that weren't gonna breed a franchise.
See, and that's what I don't like. That's what really kind of bothers me, anyway, is that it's like that they shouldn't have to be too worried about anything that breeds a franchise, mostly because all of this is already pretty well set up under the franchise, or at least under the guise of what the
Mhm.
Marvel Universe is anyway, that you have enough things that do end up tying together that you don't have to make like sequel entries. You don't have to do a 1 and then a 2 and then a 3. You can really bridge everything together and have those tie-ins in those other successive games, and basically have that same level of, commitment and detail without making it that way. It's like, make yourself the story arc where all of those games that you're making separately, similar to what was done with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, do you know bridge them all together at some other point later on down the line, and offer some sort of, like, I guess, cameo type situation where the character in this one game shows up in this next game here that's not even like a title game for them. It's not
Yeah.
Iron Man 2. It's Black Panther, but now here's Iron Man flying around, or whatever, that's also in there, that's providing some sort of aid or assistance. Just
Well, and
let them go that way.
yeah, and EA for a while, like I said, they were doing this whole thing where, if they didn't see a game having, 3, 5, different iterations down the line, 4 sequels, 3 sequels, that they could claim to the series, they didn't even bother with the title. And why bother with that when, you know, put out one really good title and it could potentially breed a series. It could make its own sequel. It could make its own trilogy just because fans love it that much. And Marvel is a strong enough franchise on its own that it's got the I guess the repertoire, the cast of characters that you can keep digging and you're never gonna find a bottom, it feels like.
Yeah, you're really never going to. But I do have hopes, though, at least after the like, every studio is going to fumble. Even the most successful ones are going to have
Yeah.
blunders and problems. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm seriously keeping my fingers crossed that we don't get a live service game out of any of these. But I'm curious to know, I guess, what these other two are going to be. I am excited to try another Iron Man game that could be on console or PC. But I am interested to see exactly what these other ones are going to be and how long it's going to be until we can actually get our hands on them. So,
Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah. I
yeah.
mean, and who knows? Maybe this could give us another Hulk Ultimate Destruction. Maybe, we could see something like a new X-Men game potentially later on down the line that focuses on Stan Lee's X-Men, since we do have the reboot of the original 90s cartoon coming back. So, I mean, there's a lot for them to work off of with this partnership coming up.
Dude, you're right. I'd love to see an X-Men 97 game.
Yeah.
That would be pretty slick. But yeah, I think we've pretty well covered that. We'll see what comes up with these Marvel titles. I'm hoping here sometime this next summer we'll start to see more details on especially what the other two are going to be. But as we wait for that, we move on from the main stories from tonight's weekly news roundup into the quest markers. That's right, the last bit of the news for the week that deserves some comments, and they are going to be coming from the one, the only, the Kyle. Kyle, what do we have going on in the quest markers for this week?
The Kyle, huh?
The
Okay.
Kyle.
Well, so for our first quest marker for this evening, Sega wants players to give their feedback on the next mini console. Apparently packaged in the Sega Genesis Mini 2, there will actually be a survey that comes with the console, basically asking players what they think the next console should be. Choices include the SC3000, the SG1000, the Master System, the Saturn, the Dreamcast, the MD Mini 3, the Game Gear Micro Part 2, or a non-Game Gear Micro, or even an arcade title. Of course, right now there's a couple Game Gears that we didn't see in the U.S. and a arcade cabinet miniaturized that had a minute launch in the U.S., but it would be great to see more of those. So Sega would like to know. Of course, survey is in Japanese, but Twitter user Gosekiyo says anyone who imports the Mega Drive Mini Console 2 will be able to take the survey. So, should be able to take the survey once you obtain your console. That all the instructions, of course, and everything will be in English at that point. Moving on to our next point. God of War Ragnarok is the second highest rated game of 2022 so far. With its stellar reviews, this could put it up against, of course, Elden Ring for a Game of the Year as a contender. But currently it sits at a Metacritic score of 94. And this is a week before launch, of course, launching this week on the 8th, or this coming week on the 8th. What else? Unfortunately, the one point I do have to make is some retailers have broken street date, and there have been lots of copies getting out there. So you might want to mute some keywords in your searches. Otherwise, you might see some spoilers. I know there was, in fact, one user that ordered a Call of Duty console from Sony Direct and instead received the collector's edition God of War console. So keep your eyes out that you're not looking up certain things, or mute things in your Twitter feed or your search engine, at least until the 8th, because stuff is already out there. And in the last bit of news, no shock to anyone, but Modern Warfare 2 launch breaks sales records. Per Activision, Modern Warfare 2 broke the sales records within 3 days of launch, hitting $800 million in sales. The previous record holder was actually generated by the sequel of the aforementioned title's previous iteration, being Modern Warfare 3, released in 2011. Also, according to Activision, it grossed more than Doctor Strange or Top Gun Maverick. With Call of Duty, of course, not releasing another title next year, there is a probability that we will see continuous sales off the title, as well as maybe even some downloadable content released in the following year that could generate even more sales for the title. But that is it for the quest markers for this evening.
Is it
still there?
I am still here.
Yes, it is. It is.
Yes. If that is it, then for the quest markers, we all know that means that it is the end of the weekly news roundup for the week of November 5th, 2022. As always, folks, thank you so much for joining us for the weekly news roundup, and of course for joining us for all of the other shenanigans and chaos that we decide to bring to the podcast world. If you liked listening to this, of course, and you missed anything, be sure to follow us on our podcast as well. We post over on anchor.fm/the-NPCs-podcast. You can find all of our episodes that we've published there over the last several years, and also find all the platforms that we are published on too. That includes Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and more. So be sure to go follow us on your favorite platform and subscribe, so that way you know when an episode becomes available, it will be immediately downloaded to your device upon publishing. Of course, follow us here on YouTube and subscribe to us on here, so that you know when we go live with the news roundup. And of course, be sure to follow us on social media on Twitter and Facebook at the NPCs Podcast. But as always, folks, that is it for this week's episode. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you all next week.
Bye-bye.